Okay, can you see the screen? So we talked about exponential growth, and this is, you asked about an example. So biological examples of exponential growth do not hold for long-term growth models like for any organism. But in microbiology, especially when we are doing bacterial culture, we see that this kind of exponential growth happens if you have too much of the culture media and you start with very few bacterial cells or a very few bacterial colonies. So you see that they keep growing and the OD keeps increasing. But that's also not forever, because any amount of bacterial growth media you start with, bacteria will um, populate it because they grow fast. So they will populate it, and at one point of time, there will be more bacteria than the media can sustain, and therefore the bacterial growth will start reaching a threshold beyond which it would not grow. So there'll be death now coming up. So that's called the log phase and the lag phase, right, of the growth. So in nature, truly, there is no example that follows exponential growth. It's just a mathematical model which assumes that given unlimited resources, any organism can just keep growing exponentially, which is this one, the red line. Can you see? And
Yes,
it
yes.
and it gives a J-shaped curve with respect to time. So n here is the population density with which we start. It will keep on increasing. And you will see that at one point of time, the slope will become very, very steep, which means that with very small amount of time increasing, there will be a huge change in population. And because the population is doubling up with every time point. So that kind of model doesn't hold true biologically. But the early phase of a bacterial growth follows exponential growth for some time, where one bacteria becomes two, then 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, and they start growing so fast, but they reach a maxima. And when we incorporate that concept of reaching the maxima and then stopping at that maxima, or you cannot cross that maximum limit, that's called the standing crop or the standing population. It's denoted by K, right? So K then becomes your carrying capacity. That is the maximum number of maximum density of a population that can be carried in ecosystem. And you will see that, so in the mathematical model also, the dn over dt, which is the rate of change of this n, is given by n into r, or r into n, whatever you want to say, because this r is intrinsic rate of growth or rate of natural increase, and this n is the initial density you started with. So whatever is the rate of that increase, naturally, the at any given point of time, the initial density has to be multiplied with that. If the rate of growth is 2, so at every given time it will be n into 2, and it will double up, right? But then we have to include this concept k minus n upon k, where k becomes the carrying capacity, and carrying capacity is the maximum number of population, or that of that species that can be sustained. So they can never cross k. So at any given point of time, whatever the n is, it is less than k, right? So k minus n over k, this whole constant here, make sure that every time from the population, something is being decreased so that it never crosses the k. And that's why the shape here becomes S-shaped, because at one point of time it saturates, right? So this is the logistic growth model, or also known as the logical growth model, or in some scientific terms, mathematical terms, called Verlost-Perl logistic growth model. Verlost and Perl gave it mathematically. Is that clear, everyone? Both of you?
So,
Yes. Yeah.
so for example, for exponential growth,
Mhm.
can't insect be an example? Insect means like mosquitoes, because we see during rainfalls, they kind of explode in number, but after that, we do have insects, but like not as comparison, like it's not as that of during
Right.
rainfall.
So the right, you're right. So till they are growing, till for them. So you said that you're saying it's a good point. It's the same thing as of a bacterial culture. When they start, they just keep on increasing exponentially. But in exponential growth model, there is no stopping. Do you see? There is nothing to stop it at any given point of time. Simply dn over dt is equal to n into r. And whatever is r, it will just keep increasing, right? The intrinsic rate of growth will always be positive because you are only relying on birth. Natural rate of natural increase, it is not rate of natural decrease, it is rate of natural increase. So even if the population is giving one progeny amongst the 10, still the rate of increase will be 0.1. So it will always keep increasing with respect to time. So nothing is bringing it down as per this mathematical model. But so the fact that mosquito population drops significantly and vanishes after some time is because everything died. But before they died, you're right that they were exploding. So breeding of mosquitoes during monsoon season, bacterial culture, cockroaches growing in sewers, all these in initial phases for some time come under the exponential growth model. Because the sheer fact is resources are too much and their population, their carrying capacity is huge. So in one city, how many mosquitoes the resources of a city can hold? Huge number of mosquitoes it can hold. But if the winters don't come and mosquitoes don't die because of unfavorable conditions, even then it's not like unlimited number of mosquitoes can breed on or in a city or on the planet. There will always be predators that feed on mosquito. If there'll be more mosquitoes, there'll be more lizards and other other reptiles that eat mosquitoes. So they will also increase. Then they will bring that to balance. That's what k minus n upon k factor comes and gives you that real life situation. So every time from the maxima, which is k, minus n, which is the current density. So current density will always be less than carrying capacity. So if there can only be 1,000 rabbits in a particular forest that can sustain, more than 1,000, there are not enough resources for them. So if there is 1,001, one has to die from the existing population so that 1,000 can sustain again. You understand? So if 1,000 is k, then at any given time, logically, in a real life scenario, the population of rabbit will be less than 1,000. So n, which is the real time density, at any given point of time, always have to be less than k. So when you do this, k minus n, it is always 1,000 minus something, 900, let's say. So it always become 100 over 1,000. So k minus n over k. And 100 over 1,000 is 1 by 10, which is 0.1. So it will always be, so r into n into 0.1. So if it was r is 1, let's say, n is 100, so 1 into 100 is 100, but into 0.1 is 10. So do you understand? It keeps it low. It will never allow it to reach the k. And if it reaches the k, then it becomes k minus k upon k, which means 100 minus 100 upon 100. So it's 0 upon 100. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. So in which case it will be 0 and then everything will become 0. So the moment you reach carrying capacity, if you want to go beyond that, that's not possible biologically. But if you have to give examples, you can give of any exploding population in its initial phases as the example for exponential growth. But in a long term, it's always logistic growth model that works. Okay, Iram, Parker, and Aisha. How are you, Aisha? And Parker, good evening.
Just I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Good too. Let me share the new screen with you all. Today we are going to start with, oh, 1 second, ecosystem. Yes. Can you all see the screen? Okay, so I'm following the earlier notation only. So it becomes ecosystem. Now, any other questions? I think I only took Iram's doubt. Aisha and Parker, do you have any doubts? How are
No,
your boards going? Are you having pre-boards in your school?
no, sir. I will be having my unit tests in around a week.
Okay, and what about you, Parker?
Sir, I am having unit tests.
You are having it now.
No, sir, not now. From Monday.
Oh, you will
Next
having
Monday.
the end. Okay, and what about Aisha?
My pre-board from Thursday.
Sorry, come again, Aisha. Your voice was a little muffled.
My pre-board from Thursday.
Okay, so it's starting Tuesday. Cool. And Iram's biology is on Monday. Okay, perfect. So there are some concepts in this chapter as well, which are important for your boards and entrances both. This is fairly easier a chapter to understand as compared to what we have already done. Some very concept heavy chapters like genetics, evolution, reproduction. So ecosystem is also a little bit intuition based, knowledge based, general knowledge that you have about environment. And if you have paid attention to environmental studies in your primary classes, you're already primed to understand the concepts of this chapter. I think this chapter does not have any mathematical or logical modeling kind of thing, but it has some sheer biological concepts only. Okay, so in this chapter, we are going to talk about first the structure and function of ecosystem. So when I say ecosystem, what do you understand by it? You have had done EVS, environmental studies, right, in previous junior classes? Hiram, Aisha? Go ahead, come on. If you discuss, it will be easier for me to also. So what do we mean by ecosystem? Ecology, ecology.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, what is ecology?
Studying about the nature.
Studying of the nature, yes, you're right to an extent. But nature is a very broad umbrella term. Everything comes in nature, right? Whether it's living or non-living, whatever we see, everything is part of nature. Even So how are you going to? Then why do we have a different term? Is the question. So ecology and ecosystem. Does it tell you something more precise about nature? Anything that you can think of?
Ecosystem means all the organisms that are in the environment and interact with each other.
All the environments, yes, that's a very good start. All the environments in the surroundings, they interact with each other, correct? They interact, but does it is it only that the organisms interact with other organisms? They also interact with non-living things, right? You agree? It's not just they always interact with living things.
Yes.
How do an organism can interact with a non-living thing? Any example? Simple.
Maybe
Yeah. Go ahead,
I don't
Iram.
know it's right or not.
And
Like
you don't have to worry about it. Let's discuss. How
maybe
do you think
a
of?
human drinking
Yeah.
water.
Yes, that's perfectly right. Water is a very essential thing. I'm just surprised you didn't say breathing. Every organism breathes. That's the first basic interaction we do with abiotic system, which is gaseous atmosphere. But you went to drinking water, which is also perfectly true. Yes, we drink water, and water is a abiotic thing. But we don't just rely on water for drinking it, right? It's a very important component of our ecosystem, even if we are not drinking it, right? So it regulates temperature. If you have rivers, ponds around you, it also regulates how much heat Deserts are the best examples where interaction with water is almost negligible. So organisms have to bear other consequences, right? And how, let me ask you, how small and big can be an ecosystem according to you? Let's try to understand that. What is the smallest possible ecosystem? A pond? Let me start. I think a pond can be the smallest ecosystem. What do you think, Kiran?
Yeah, maybe.
So nothing smaller than a pond can make an ecosystem. You agree? What do others think? What is the smallest ecosystem? How small an ecosystem can be or should be? And how big? Both. Come on, come on. Give up give answers. It's like bidding. There's no, let's keep going smaller. Let's see what is the right answer. I started with pond. Can anyone go even smaller? Anything that is even smaller and you can say that it's an ecosystem.
Aquarium.
Aquarium, right? That's very smaller than pond. If aquarium can be ecosystem, then pond stands nowhere being the candidate or the smallest. Everyone agrees aquarium is an ecosystem?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. So anything smaller than aquarium, that can be, aquariums are very small. Anything smaller than that, that can be an ecosystem? Yep. No. Come on. Come on. What if I take a small piece of meat, uh, any carbon source, and leave it so that microorganisms infect it? Can it be an ecosystem for fungus, microorganisms to grow?
Yes.
Yeah. So a small piece of meat. We have come very small. Anything smaller than that? Now, even ecosystems can be very, very small. So aquariums, like Iram said, and even our crop fields, terrace garden, our gardens that we backyard kitchen garden, even if you're having plants in your room or somewhere, that is an ecosystem. Ecosystem can be as small as a drop of water. If there are multiple microorganisms living in a pond, if you take a drop of it and keep culturing it, that small tiny drop of water can also have organisms interacting with each other and organisms interacting with abiotic factors as well. The most common abiotic factors that organisms interact with are pH, acidity, basicity around. It is pressure, temperature, humidity if they are living on land. All these are abiotic factors, right? Light, heat, they are also heat. I already said in terms of temperature. So all these are interactions. So if you have to define an ecosystems, you can just say that it's a functional unit. It can be a very, very small one drop unit that is functional. So it's a functional unit of nature where living organisms interact among themselves and also with the surrounding non-living environment. Make sense, everyone? So let's write it. How to define ecosystem? It is the functional unit. Now, it all depends on the perspective from which we are studying it. So if we are studying the ecosystem from the perspective of big habitat regions like desert versus the rainforest, then the whole rainforest for us becomes an ecosystem that we are studying. In that rainforest, if there is a pond and I'm studying the pond, one pond versus the other in the same forest, then these two different ponds become two different ecosystems for me, because maybe one of them have slightly different pH and different organisms, maybe more of frogs and snakes around, but in the other, it's the frogs are not there, or it's mostly inhabited by fish. So it can have two different kinds of ecosystem. Okay, so when I say functional unit, I have to define it in terms of its boundaries. So there is no smaller or bigger limit to it. We can also say that the whole ecosystem of the planet as a whole, when we don't have any other planet as of now to compare Earth with, but let's assume that there was another planet where Earth-like life was possible, then the ecosystem of these two planets could also be studied. So you understand, like we can go even as big as we want, we can go as small as we want, till we find functional aspects, interaction between organisms and interaction between organism and the non-living component of environment. It's happening in a drop of pond water also, it's happening in the whole forest also. Make sense, everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
So it's functional unit of nature where living organisms interact among themselves, where living organisms interact among themselves and with the surrounding abiotic environment. And with the surrounding abiotic environment. Okay, make sense? Now, as I told you, we can define our own ecosystems, depend on what we are studying and what is the question of research or question of discussion. But talking about all the ecosystems that are present on planet Earth, we broadly divide them into two categories. Either we talk about terrestrial ecosystem, or we talk about aquatic ecosystem, because these two are habitable zones which have stable life. There is no aerial ecosystem as such, like because life suspended in air is not a common thing, right? So terrestrial and aquatic. Now, if I'm talking about terrestrial, can you give me some examples of terrestrial ecosystems? And some examples of aquatic? Aquatic is easy, we already
Forest,
talked about. Yeah, terrestrial, you're saying, yes, forests. Now,
grassland.
there are different types of forest also, deciduous, evergreen, rainforest. But let's say we are taking all under forest. Then you're saying grasslands, right? Grasslands are not forests because they are mostly devoid of big trees and long bushy trees, but mostly it is grasses heavily dominated by monocots. That's why they are a different ecosystem. Their temperature, rainfall regimes all are different. Yes, and
Desert.
desert being ones. Yes, right. Deserts are also terrestrial ecosystems. Anything else?
Yeah.
Sorry?
Yeah, ecosystem.
I didn't understand that. Go again, or you can write, yes, sure. Yes, Aisha is saying trees. So mostly I think what you're saying also comes into forests as an ecosystem, unless and until you want to define one tree as an ecosystem, which is also possible. Like big trees like a banyan tree have their own ecosystem running on them. Yeah, but in general, forest, grassland, deserts, and anything else?
Nurseries.
Sorry, come again. Wait, let me use the other earphone also, maybe. All of your voices are a little muffled for me. Yeah, go ahead again. Can you?
Nurseries.
Nursery. You're saying nursery. Yes,
Yes.
But that's an artificial one that we create, right? Yes, right. But it does fit. But nurseries are not, unless and until you. So what people do in nurseries is mostly they propagate plants, and oftentimes they do it through vegetative propagation more than they allow interaction between pollinators and pollens. But you're right, some interaction does happen there also. So it can become an ecosystem if it is a properly maintained nursery, right? For aquatic, you have ponds, you have lakes, rivers, which are like all different from each other. We also have marshy wetlands, right? Marshes or wetlands, they are also ecosystem in their own. And anything else? Oceans and seas are all ecosystems. Okay. Every time you will change these words, you will see that a different kind of interaction taking place. Now, what is important about ecosystem is how it is set and how it functions. So to set an ecosystem, we need a structure, and all these ecosystems that we have mentioned here as examples have their own structures. But for its functionality to continue and for the ecosystem to keep working, you need a mechanism, or I should say, components that that keep working parallelly, all of them together. So if I ask you, uh, how can I say that a lake or a pond is an ecosystem? Or what is, it's all water mixed? Or when I say a forest, we have all trees and everything growing. What is different still in the same lake or in the same forest? What do you find is different in terms of their structure? What is the physical structure of an ecosystem? So I'll take two examples. You have to understand this because, so when I say physical structure of ecosystem, what do I mean? A forest is a forest and a lake is a lake. Any idea? What is different in the forest?
It's
Yeah, go ahead, go ahead. Whether it's a forest or a lake, there are certain rules that are common. Wherever there is an ecosystem and there is a interaction, certain rules are always followed and are common. Can anyone tell me what are those? The rules come from a common fact called stratification. You know about this term? There is stratification always, which means different levels, physical levels, vertical layers are occupied by different organisms. So in a forest or in a lake, if you see, there is always a vertical distribution of different species that occupy different levels. So you will see these big trees that require a lot of sunlight to grow. If any plant requires a lot of sunlight to grow and they are in the forest, then they better be tall. If you're not tall enough to reach the canopy of the forest, you will not be getting sunlight, correct? So if you go in dense forests and if you are walking on the forest floor, you might not even see the sun often, correct? So how the distribution happens is that those who are at the bottom, small shrubs or herbs or bushes or smaller trees, they will adapt themselves in a way that they can still manage to do every critical thing with limited sunlight exposure. Okay. If you are in a jungle, much before the sun sets on the horizon, it becomes dark. Have you noticed that? Anyone has been for a wildlife jungle safari? to a forest, not to a grassland. In a grassland, you can see the sun setting at the horizon because there are no tall trees to, right? So that stratification in a grassland is very different. But a stratification in a forest is very different because top canopies take a lot of sunlight. Very little reaches the forest floor. So at the floor, you will find organisms that have adapted to survive with very low sunlight, right? Similarly, in a lake also, you will see that uh, the fish that needs often more uh, oxygen, or who rely on fresh insects or food that they can pick from the surface of the water, they always live on the upper strata layer of the pond. As you go down and down, you will see organisms that do not rely on surface, and they live in the lower strata. Even in oceans, you will see that the organisms that you will find on the surface, they are different. Like whales will always be found in towards the upper surface because they often have to come up to breathe, right? But if you go deeper down, you will see at the forest, at the ocean bed, they are completely different organisms, and those organisms have adapted and evolved to live in less oxygen, to live in high pressure, because as you go down in the ocean, the pressure increases a lot. And you will see that they are not very pigmented kind of organisms. So often organisms like jellyfish or all these, you can see very deep down, they can survive, right? And they will not do photosynthesis. So photosynthetic organisms in ocean shouldn't be at the ocean floor because no sunlight will reach there, right? So these photosynthetic weeds or ocean organisms that rely on photosynthetic, like photosynthetic bacteria also, you will find them in the upper layer. Does it make sense, everyone? So that's called physical structure of an ecosystem, and that's how it's set. It's called stratification. Is it clear, everyone?
Yes, sir.
So just write down in one line, stratification is the vertical distribution. Stratification is the vertical distribution of different species occupying different levels in an ecosystem. Different species occupying different levels in an ecosystem. So this is the physical structure. Okay. Second important aspect is components of ecosystem, functional components. When I say components, I'm talking about functionality, not about structure anymore, but components of ecosystem. Now, every ecosystem, terrestrial or aquatic, need three things. Four basically, but 3 and 4 is mostly joined together. First thing is, think about a human society. So for a society, a city, a country, the whole planet where humans live, to run it, what are the major things? So what do you depend on? First thing, you depend on a lot of things being produced. Production or productivity is the main thing, right? For humans, we need the production of everything. If the production of any one thing stops and humans are not able to do it, either we find an alternative or it becomes very difficult for us to cope, right? So most important thing is production of food. So that's why we have agricultural lands. So food has to be produced, harvested, processed, packaged, come to our supermarkets where we can go and buy it. If it stops, then the human society all of a sudden will go into a chaos. People will leave whatever they are doing and everyone will start farming whatever they can to survive on it, right? Do you understand what I'm saying? Or we will go back to how we used to live, back hunting and gathering. So a stable society depends on production of a lot of things. Similarly, in an ecosystem, many things have to be produced. Most importantly, food. Food, there is the carbon source food, starch. So the first most important aspect component of ecosystem is productivity, right? And if we are producing, if ecosystem is, we'll talk about what they are producing and how they are producing. But if things are being produced in ecosystem, what also will be done? If you are producing things, yes, go ahead.
The products are used or consumed.
Perfect. Consumption, or I should say decomposition, right? If you are making something complex, you're producing something, you're also using it up, and then you are decomposing it, correct? The same happens in human society with food and all our waste. That's why all the biodegradable things that we produce also gets decomposed or consumed, correct? Consumption is just a way of decomposing what has been produced, right? And then between production and decomposition in nature, what is one thing that's happening? So you already know about from your EVS lessons about how plants and animals are structured, right? The plants are called primary producers, right, on the planet, because plants and photosynthetic bacteria, they are called primary producers because they produce everything that goes up in the food chain. So from one level of productivity to its decomposition, in between, what's happening is flow of energy. So our planet is limited. When we don't think like this, often human becomes very, very greedy in terms of development. You know, everyone needs a car, everyone needs a home, but if we are not putting a check on the vehicles that we're making still run on fuel, which is fossil fuel. So we have to shift to something which is not fossil fuel. Then only you can allow to make more and more vehicles. You cannot allow to make more and more vehicles which are running on traditional fuels, because that will just kill the planet. Everyone needs space to make more and more cities, but we have to make a balance that cities should not come at the cost of cutting down forests and rainforests, because that will then again start having effects like droughts, famine, cyclone, and all of these are increasing. It's not like they don't happen naturally. Even if you have lots of forests, they will happen because they are disturbances in nature. But if you tip the balance of the nature, these disturbances are more often. They will increase in its frequency. Okay. So another thing that always keeps happening is flow of energy. So our planet is limited. Everything on the planet is limited. Nothing is coming from space except for one thing, which is sunlight. We have unlimited sunlight that comes from the sun for some billions of years at least. And that sunlight has to be trapped by plants and has to be converted. Its energy has to be used to make something useful, which is, you know, fixing it and making starch, the process of photosynthesis. So photosynthesis is the most amazing process and it's a very, very good process to say interaction between organisms and non-living components. That energy then goes to higher consumers when they eat plants. That same energy molecules goes to second higher consumers which eat animals, and so on. It keeps on going up in the ecosystem. So energy has to keep flowing from one level to another, from one ecosystem to another, and back. And the fourth thing, when this energy is flowing, when organisms are taking birth and they are dying, with them, whatever they have in their body also needs to be recycled. So that's called nutrient recycle. Energy flow and nutrient recycle are kind of joined. It's like two sides of the same coin, but still they are mechanistically different things. Nutrient cycling is the fourth. So all these are the most important components of an ecosystem that you have to pay attention to. Okay. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Any doubt still here? So far, so good.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's talk about productivity then. So what is production? What are we talking about? What is being produced in an ecosystem? So to produce something, you need an input, some processing, and output, like our factories work. Okay, you send inside metal, it does something and comes out anything useful, like a bicycle or anything made up of metal. So what's happening here? What is the input for ecosystem? For all the ecosystems, the one common constant input is, yeah, go ahead.
Solar energy.
Solar energy, right? So for productivity, there has to be an input, and you can write down the constant input for all ecosystem for its functionality to be able to sustain is solar energy, sunlight. Okay. What is light? Basically, what is solar energy? A form of radiation.
Light.
Yeah, light is a form of radiation, right? And light is a radiation, and which can travel. Radiations can travel without a medium. Correct? You know that?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's why solar energy becomes the most important kind of energy. We also have sound energy, vibrational energy. All these require medium to travel, right? But sunlight, being a radiation, like other electromagnetic radiations, they do not require a medium. So from sun to earth, it's all vacuum, but can still travel and reach earth and can still have energy in it, which other organisms can use and utilize. So one big input is sunlight. And then what are they making from the sunlight? So the productivity is divided into two things. One is the primary productivity, or called primary production, which is made from utilizing the energy of sunlight, solar energy, right? And plants and photosynthetic bacteria can do that. So primary production is nothing but the amount of biomass that is produced. Amount of biomass. So if you see a photosynthetic bacteria or a plant, all it does, it takes CO2 from atmosphere, which is again non-living component, abiotic, a gas, and water, which is again abiotic, non-living component. And with the help of sunlight, yes, Parker, go ahead.
Sir, what do you mean by biomass?
Yeah, I'm coming to that only. So bio means, the word bio is
Life.
living, life. Mass is
The weight.
mass is not weight. Weight is mass into G. That's weight. So when you stand on a physical quantity, when you stand on a weighing machine, G is pulling you down, and whatever is your mass gets multiplied by your G, the force of gravity, and that's your weight. But what is mass? Your weight will be different on Earth and on Moon and in space. You understand that? If you weigh yourself on Earth versus you weigh yourself on Moon and you weigh yourself in space station, that will be different depending on different gravity. But your mass won't change, right? Unless and until you are losing it or gaining it. So what is mass?
The elements that are present.
The matter that you constitute. All the atoms, molecules together in your body is the mass, right? So your weight minus the force of gravity is your mass. So I have some mass. correct? And if you have to find your mass, you have to just divide it by your weight by gravitational constant. So whatever is your weight, if you divide it by 9.8, you will get your mass, right? So basically we multiply mass 10 times to get the weight on Earth. So biomass is the living matter. So all the matter that is present inside living systems is biomass. Is that clear, Parker?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So how does biomass formed and increases? It's formed by these primary producers. They take abiotic mass, non-biological mass like CO2. CO2 has a weight, right? It has a carbon atom. It has 2 oxygen atoms, and both carbon and oxygen atoms have some weight. We call it atomic mass, remember? Not weight, I should say mass. So that mass is abiotic. Water again is abiotic, and sunlight gives you the solar energy. Using that energy, the living system can drive a reaction where they fix CO2. Basically, they split water into hydrogen and oxygen. You know photosynthesis, how it works. And they insert hydrogen into that CO2 molecule to reduce it into starch. So reduction of CO2 leads to production of starch. Now starch is C6H12O6. Many carbons, many hydrogen, many oxygen combined together. And that increases a biomass because that's a mass which is present inside the living system. You will not see starch in the atmosphere. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's how biomass is produced. Then using that starch, an organism can produce other sorts of biomass, other sorts of molecules, lipids, um, complex carbohydrates, proteins, and all such things that increase the biomass. So when we are born, we are little, we have a very less mass, okay? We have less number of cells also. As we keep growing, our size increases, number of cells increases, the total biomass of our body increases, we become bigger, heavier. But how do we do that? We do that because we feed on something, use it to make our cells divide and grow. So primary production is where the amount of biomass or organic matter is produced per unit area over a time period by the photosynthetic plants and bacteria. Make sense? Is it clear, everyone? Yes, no, am I audible? Am I gone?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Audible. Yeah. So write down amount of biomass or organic matter produced by photosynthetic plants and bacteria, produced by photosynthetic plants and bacteria per unit area over a fixed time period. Per unit area over a fixed time period. That's called primary productivity. So if I go to a rainforest, if I go to a pond, if I go to study any ecosystem, and if I'm addressing the question, what is the primary production of this ecosystem? Then all I will be focusing on is how much of organic matter is being produced by photosynthesis in this ecosystem. Okay, for that I have to know how many species and what all organisms do photosynthesis. On an average, what is the photosynthetic potential, how much photosynthesis they do. And if I found about one particular plant, how much of photosynthesis it does in 1 hour or 1 day, then on an average, I will multiply it with millions of plants that ecosystem might have, or photosynthetic organisms that ecosystem might have, and I will get a gross amount of primary productivity. Okay, and when we find when we have to represent primary production, we represent it as in terms of, either you can represent it as weight, how much weight has been increased in this particular ecosystem through photosynthesis, or energy, how much energy has been added to this ecosystem through photosynthesis. And what do I mean by energy? Same thing. We know that one molecule of starch or glucose, how much energy it can give us. And if this is the rate of photosynthesis, and if there are millions of photosynthetic organisms, how much, and this will be huge number, how much energy it added to the system, right? It's just like when you monitor your diet. So you say that if I eat one burger, I am adding X thousands of calories to my body, correct? How did we calculate how many calories or energy is there in the burger? How many kilocalories are there in the burger? Just by weighing the burger, like what is the weight, and the total weight, how much comes from the starch component, which means the bun, the bread, how much comes from the veggies, fruits, how much comes from the steak or chicken or whatever aloo patty is inside it. And then you take an overall estimate of how many calories or glucose molecules it can give you, and how many calories you can produce by burning all those glucose in your blood. So anyways, every day we eat much more than we need. So a lot of goes into reserve. That's why we should not eat so much more than we need just because we like eating. So this whole concept of eating more than you need, or eating unnecessarily, is not considered good in many cultures, because you won't be able to utilize it unless and until you are utilizing, like you are very active, you are playing some sport, you are hiking, you are doing exercises, and then you will burn extra additional calories. Otherwise, if you're just sitting and studying, if you're studying also, then you will burn a lot of calories, because your neurons are constantly doing things. It's not like they are not doing things when you're not studying. They always work. But overall, whatever is the critical amount of energy you need to survive, anything more than that, either you should then burn it through some activity, or it will get deposited in your body, because body doesn't know what to do with it. So primary production can be expressed in two ways. Either it is a weight, total weight of the ecosystem that's added, which you can say gram per meter square, or kilogram per kilometer square. So gram per meter square. How many grams per meter square has been added to this ecosystem? If it's a big ecosystem, you will say kilograms or tons or anything like that. Or in terms of energy, what will do energy? Kilocalorie per meter square. How many kilocalories are present in that gram? So you just have to convert it depending on what molecule it is, right? And so this is exact number in terms of weight or energy that's get added, the production. But we know that there is a rate. So in nature, it doesn't happen. It doesn't come in packets. It's constantly happening. Something is being produced constantly through photosynthesis. Or in our body, we are growing every day. When I say growing in terms of, increasing weight or metabolizing something or something. So if you're talking about rate of production, rate of primary biomass production, okay, then you will rate is anything by time, right? So you will use the same thing, either gram per meter square, and you will divide by time, which means gram per meter square per year or per day or per month, okay, for that ecosystem. Or you do the same thing for energy, which means kilocalorie per meter square per year. Make sense, everyone? So this is rate. Rate is anything with respect to time. So this is, you're defining a time here. Okay. Any doubt? Anything problematic? So
sir.
these kind of questions come in your entrances. What is the unit correctly? What is the unit that correctly represents rate of biomass production in a forest? And instead of year, it could be month. And when you write it in one, I think you have studied it in your physics classes. If I want to write it in one line, so there sometimes in examples you won't find it like this. So it will be gram per meter square per year, right? So this is how it's written. Gram meter raised to power minus 2, year raised to power minus 1. So this basically means this notation, right? You understand, everyone, this part? Here also kilocalorie meter square minus
Yes, sir.
minus, yeah, and then per year. So just pay attention to this. This is the rate. Now there are two concepts in terms of weight that that you should discuss. So one is called gross productivity and one is called net productivity. Have you heard of these two terms, gross and net? What is a gross? So how many of you have seen a cylinder, a LPG cylinder in your homes? Do you have LPG cylinders in your home? Of course, as a fuel in the kitchen.
Yes.
Yeah. So on that LPG cylinder, you will always find two weights. One will be gross weight and one will be net weight. Have you ever seen that? Tell
We
me.
never see that.
Ever see that? Okay. How many of you have bought uh, um, any beverage? Beverage comes in liters, so let's say, or cookies that comes in fancy metal boxes. Have you bought these cookies which comes in, or Ferrero Rocher that comes in proper packed boxes?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So if you see that box also, there'll be a gross weight or there'll be a net weight. So if you are buying 1 kg of cookies or 1 kg of Ferrero Rocher chocolate, you get that box, you keep that box on any weighing machine. What do you think should be the weight of that box? If it has 1 kg of cookies inside it, the weight will always be more than 1 kg because the weight of the box that you're not going to eat, you didn't pay for the box, they just packed it like that. But the box also will have a weight, right? Is that weight of your use when you are buying cookies? Is that weight is what you are going to eat? The box? No, right?
No.
So it's mandatory for the manufacturers to say if the gross weight is 1 kg, then the cookies or the chocolate inside it is not 1 kg. The gross weight includes everything, the packing also. So that's the gross. The net weight is of the material that is being sold. So you are buying that because of the chocolate component or the cookies component which is inside. You're not buying it for the box. Do you understand what I'm saying? So gross
Yes.
weight in case of a LPG cylinder will be the amount of liquefied fuel which is inside that cylinder plus the metallic cylinder's weight itself. But the net weight will be what is the weight of the fuel that has been filled inside the cylinder. So both has to be mentioned so that you can figure out if your cylinder is properly filled or not. Because you're not buying the cylinder for the weight of the metal. That's of no use to you. But since a cylinder is that is the only thing in which you can have that fuel in the home, it will come with that. So gross primary productivity is the rate of production of total organic matter in the ecosystem. Every molecule of glucose fixed by any photosynthetic organism adds to the gross primary productivity. But if I'm talking about a plant, let's say there is a tree, and I say that this tree in 1 hour gives me 100 kgs of primary production. I'm talking about weight. Okay, and it's a single tree, so no concept of per meter square. So this tree gives me 100 kgs of weight every day, let's say. But do you think a tree gaining 100 kg of weight every day, even if it is producing 100 kgs of organic matter, do you think the tree gaining that much of weight every day or every week? No, right? Every leaf of the tree is doing photosynthesis, and every leaf is fixing CO2 and making glucose. And if you see that the molecular weight of glucose is, let's say, somewhere around 300 to 400 grams. So 1 mole of glucose will be 400 grams. If every leaf fixes 1 mole in 1 day, and there are 10,000 leaves, so 300 grams by 10,000, it's too much of weight of just glucose. Have you thought about it ever? The tree is fixing too much of glucose every day, but the tree is not getting that much heavier every day. Yes or no? Do you understand what I'm saying? People, does it make sense?
Yes.
Per day, how much food do you eat in terms of grams or kgs? Easily 1.5 kg, 1 kg to 1.5 kg you eat from your breakfast to your dinner. All the weights included, you eat that much weight, right? But all of that
Yes,
does
sir.
not get added to your system, because you'll say that a lot of it goes out as waste. It's undigested food. Even from the digested food, all the glucose that goes in your blood, if you see the combined weight of all that glucose, that also does not get added to your body every day. Why? It's very logical. You know the answer. Come on. See, this is the concept that no one teaches in schools. Syllabus is just to cover. Let's cover the syllabus. Put a bed sheet on it and cover it. That's the worst way to study. Let's uncover. Let's open the bed sheet and see what's happening. Why are we studying this senseless chapter about pond, lake, primary production, secondary production? Makes no sense. Just have to remember and put it in exam. Yeah. But if you understand the concept, you will realize that, oh, everything is related to what's happening inside me, what's happening around me. And that's why it's important to understand. So that's why we study, not just to pass exams, but to get educated about things around us. Yes. So Parker has a very beautiful answer. And she says, because it gets broken down for energy, and that's perfectly correct an answer. The answer is respiration. Whatever is the amount of production plant produces, plant itself to live has to do metabolism, has to do respiration. So the glucose that the plant itself is fixing every day, some proportion of it, the plant itself is breaking down and releasing CO2 out. Do you understand that? We are also doing the same.
Yes, sir.
So all the weight of all the glucose that is fixed by the plant does not get added to the plant every day. But all the weight that has been produced is called gross primary production. But all of this is not of use to the next level because there are respiratory losses. We call that respiratory loss. And that, so to define gross primary production, write down, it is the rate of production of total organic matter during photosynthesis. Okay. And the production of total organic matter during photosynthesis. Okay. So this is the total organic matter produced. And the concept of net primary production, which is the useful thing. So we would also like to know how much of it went in the respiratory loss and how much is available. So write down net primary production is available biomass for consumption by heterotrophs. Now, heterotrophs, you already know, are the organisms that cannot synthesize their own biomass through photosynthesis. So photosynthetic organisms are called autotrophs, and those who rely on plants are called heterotrophs or other organisms. For example, there are herbivores, which are secondary consumers. They rely on plants. And then there are carnivores, which are tertiary consumers that rely on herbivores, right? All of them are heterotrophs. So the net primary production is, if I define it in terms of formula, it is gross primary production minus R, and R is respiratory loss. Make sense, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yes, perfect. So whatever plants are producing, they are also using it. And whatever is left goes to the next level. So this is primary production. Two types of primary production, gross and net. Make sense? Not confusion between gross and net. Is there any confusion?
No.
No. Okay. Now then there is secondary production, and that you can very well answer. What is secondary production? When the NPP is available for consumption by the heterotrophs, they eat it like we eat our salads and vegetables and fruits and our rice and dal and everything. And what we do? We break it down, digest it, take out important stuff from it, absorb it, and we make our own mass, right? Yes or no?
Yeah.
And it's not equivalent to how much we are consuming. It's always very disproportional. So one thing is, if you are eating plant source, so how much of rice you would have consumed by now to increase your weight by 1 kg? It's never linear. It cannot be. So it's not like you eat 1 kg rice and your weight increases by 1 kg. Momentarily it does, because you have everything is in your stomach. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about after proper metabolism, only a few grams gets added to your body if you have consumed 1 kg of rice or 1 kg of flesh or anything else. So that's called secondary production. So write down secondary production or secondary productivity is the rate of formation of organic matter by consumers or heterotrophs. Rate of production of organic matters by heterotrophs. So one thing that you must have realized by now is that primary productivity depends on photosynthetic organisms, which trap sunlight energy and convert inorganic molecules into organic molecule. Secondary productivity depends on heterotrophs that consume these plants. They take the biomass that they produced, metabolize it, and make their own biomass. That's secondary consumption. Secondary production. Is that clear? Yes.
Yes.
And in terms of its exact mass, biomass, it goes on in decreasing as it goes up in the hierarchy. Okay, so X number of biomass, when it goes from plants to herbivores, it decreases. from the same amount of biomass, herbivores produce very less. Then when that goes to carnivores, it again decreases. In other words, I want to say that carnivores needs to eat a lot of herbivores to make their body, and herbivore needs to eat a lot of plants to make its body. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Now, the second thing is decomposition. So we understood everything about production. What about decomposition? How does decomposition happens in nature?
By decomposers.
By decomposers. Now I'll do one thing for decomposition. I will go to just give me 1 second. I will go to your do you all have your NCERT with you, people? Yes. Okay, great. If yes, can you? I'll stop sharing this and I will start sharing your NCERT. Let's see if it works. Yeah, can you see the screen that I'm sharing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. This is the decomposition. It's very well summarized in the textbook itself. So let's do it from here. Everyone has opened their NCERT. Parker, Iram,
Yes,
Aisha.
sir.
If anyone has issues, just let me know. I'll just make this a little bigger. Yeah, you can all see it properly, right? Those who don't
Yes,
have
sir.
their books, focus here. Yeah, so decomposition. So as Iram said, so we need decomposers. We need proper organisms that decompose. And all these decomposers are mostly not primary producers because they produce and then something else decomposes. So you have heard of earthworms, right? Earthworms are a great example of decomposers that decompose or break down complex organic matter into simpler forms. That's what decomposing is. So something very complex got made by the producers, and you need to break it down so that it can again be recycled. That's decomposition. Okay. So simply, as you can see here, decomposers break down complex organic matter into or inorganic substances like CO2, water, and nutrients. And this process is called decomposition. Cool, everyone? You can mark all these things in your book only. Yeah. So let me ask you, if a plant dies and it falls to the ground, it's still a very complex organic biomass. You agree or not? Even if it is dead, it is still as complex as it was when it was alive. It still has all the xylem, phloem, cells, tissues, everything. Same is for an animal, right? When we die, we are very, very complex because we have grown into a complex organism right from the time of a zygote. So from zygote, we became embryo, fetus, took birth, we grew, and then we die later on. We are very complex. We have lots of tissues, cell types, all these things. We need to break down, disintegrate into small, small components from which we are made so that it can all go back to nature and something else can use it. So in a way, planet Earth follows law of conservation of mass, right? So, and energy, of course. So whatever mass the Earth has, we cannot add to it without primary producers. We can only add to it with primary producers because they can make with inorganic substances. But again, if you see the total mass of organic and inorganic combined, it is conserved. So CO2, water, living tissues, everything is what it is on the Earth. No CO2 comes from outside the space. No water, no other thing comes from outside except for some meteorites falling here and there. What comes is the radiation sunlight. So decomposition becomes very important if you want the ecosystem to keep functioning. Otherwise, we will finish all the raw material to make final complex organisms. And if these organisms cannot be decomposed, then the nature is gone. So how beautifully in evolution, decomposers have also evolved along with producers. And that's why they are important. So dead plants, anything which is leaf, bark, flowers, even dead animals, including the fecal matter, that's very, very complex substance, even what we defecate. All of them together are called detritus. So detritus is complex organic waste material or dead material, and that needs to be decomposed. Is detritus clear?
Yes, sir.
So detritus becomes raw material for decomposers, and this detritus can then be broken down by multiple processes. For example, fragmentation is one, leaching is other, catabolism. Catabolism is simply opposite of anabolism. So remember I told you in metabolism, there are two things, anabolism and catabolism, humification and leaching, and mineralization here. So these five, and note it down because this question comes, these five processes are predominantly what breaks down detritus into its simpler forms, simpler inorganic form. Okay. And organisms that rely on this detritus, anything dead, decaying, fecal matter, are called detritivores because they eat this detritus and convert it into smaller particles. So detritivores like earthworm, and all these processes are not happening in sequence one by one. So that's one misconception you should not have in head. Multiple of these processes from these five can be happening on the same detritus parallelly. And let's see how. So for example, fragmentation is simply physically breaking down into smaller fragments, correct? Make sense?
Yes.
So when an earthworm eats the detritus, which is present in the soil, it is physically breaking it down in its body using its crop, gut, peristaltic movement, and with the prostomium, the mouth also. It's cutting it. So fragmentation is happening on these detritus all the time. When it goes inside the body of the earthworm, enzymes also start acting on it, right? So if enzymes are working at the same time on it, or even outside, before it physically ate, a earthworm physically ingested the detritus, maybe microbes like fungus and bacteria are already acting on it. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So that's catabolism is already happening. Enzymes are already breaking internally the complex molecules into smaller molecules. And then we take it, and then we also start breaking it physically and also enzymatically. In we means earthworm also start breaking it physically and enzymatically inside their body. Okay. So multiple things can happen at the same time. So remember that. But remember what is each. Fragmentation is physical breakdown into smaller particles. Then comes leaching. Leaching is or all the inorganic nutrient that is water soluble. They get solubilized in water and goes to lower soil horizon. So they kind of seep down into the ground. That's called leaching. Okay. Then they seep down and get stored somewhere deep in the crust. That's called leaching. Does it make sense?
Sir, can you explain leaching again?
Yeah. So in leaching, as you can also see here, suppose an animal died in a forest. So the dead body of the animal is lying on the forest floor in soil. Now microbes will start breaking it. That's called catabolism through enzymes. Some other earthworms and some other worms or insects will start eating it. Okay. Birds will start eating it. That's called fragmentation. They will also start breaking it down through catabolism. But if you just see the portion, the bottom side of the organism, which is in contact with soil, which is being broken down by microorganisms already, which we call as decaying. So the body starts decaying from the bottom, which is in direct contact, which is out. The body which is not in direct contact with soil may start drying up because all water will slightly dry up and will start drying up. But the body which is in contact will be moist and bacteria will break it down and it will start decaying. So inorganic components like phosphorus, nitrogen, carbon, water, they will be soluble in water, right? On the lower side,
Yes.
do you understand? And they will start, and if suppose someday rains happened, so all those nutrients which already were broken down into inorganic form, they will start percolating down and down in the soil layers, right? Through water, because they are soluble in water. And when groundwater gets deposited down, along with that, these nutrients will also get deposited, inorganic nutrients. And that's called leaching. So leaching is a way of decomposing or complex organic matter and bringing it back into the soil and the earth crust. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
No? Yeah. So that's leaching. Okay. Precipitation and then getting stored, which is not available now from outside. You have to dig it to get it available, or plants have to grow their roots deep to reach this nutrient. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever thought who goes and puts manure and fertilizers in jungles? No one. The jungles have so huge trees that require so much of nutrient. Where is all that nutrient, nitrogen, everything coming from? From the soil, which is already there, because things also keep dying in forest, and leaching keeps happening in the forest floor. So a lot of leaching locks a lot of nutrient, inorganic nutrient in the soil layers, very, very deep. Plant roots reach there, access that nutrient and use it. And they grow big, then they die, fall on the forest floor, again leaching, and a lot of nutrient goes back. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So that's leaching. Catabolism, as I told you, it's enzymatic action on anything. So bacteria, fungus, even inside our stomach, everything that's breaking down organic matter into smaller parts through enzymes is called catabolism. It is opposite of anabolism. Ana means making up, kata means cutting down. How I remember it is, kata has a cut, catabolism. So you are cutting into smaller parts. So that's catabolism. Fourth is humification. You know what is humification? So humification and mineralization often happens together. How many of you have heard of the word called humus? This soil is very, very rich and fertile because it has humus. What is humus? And it's written here. It is a dark colored amorphous substance called humus. Any idea? If you go to any fertile land or any vegetation, you will see that the upper layer of the soil is darker. It has granules, dark brown granules, and it's darker. And if you dig down, then the soil color becomes more lighter. Yes or no? So the upper layer contains a lot of detritus being broken down, especially in a forest. If you go to a forest floor and clean the leaves and something, you will see black kind of soil. If you dig it, then the soil color will become lighter because all the humus stays on the top. And it's important for the humus to be there because humus is basically a amorphous substance which does not easily gets broken down, and it locks a lot of nutrient in it. Okay, so microbial action is very, very limited on humus because it humidified. So humification, this detritus got broken down and got solidified, become very, very compact and strong. Over the time, it will slowly release nutrients in the soil. So if you have a humus rich soil, that soil is going to be fertile for very long. So farmer, it's very good land for farming or agriculture or growing forest. There is no humus in a desert soil. Basically, it's sand or on a beach. Why? Because constant, sweeping of the soil is there. So that's called soil erosion. How many of you have heard of the term soil erosion? During floods, a lot of soil erosion happens. Anyone knows what is soil erosion? Come on, quickly. Erosion. What does the word erosion means? Rabia, Iram, Aisha. To erode away, like corrosion, erosion, corrode away or erode away. So what happens is if you do not have enough plants, so the roots hold the soil together. But if you don't have a lot of trees in a particular land, and if there is a wind, fast wind or fast flowing water, it will sweep all the humus with it. And loss of this very rich, nutrient rich layer of soil is called soil erosion. So deserts are produced by continuous soil erosion. And that's why we need lot of trees to protect forests. So the characteristic of humus is written here. Sorry. This. So it is humus is highly resistant to microbial action and undergoes decomposition at a very slow rate. So it's like a fixed deposit of nutrients in the soil. Very, very slowly it will give you profits over time, and it will be enough to sustain life, plants, growth, everything. And you can be rest assured that if this soil has a lot of humus, it's a very, very fertile soil. Okay, and last, mineralization. Mineralization is simply when this humus is broken down by microbial action slowly, then it's called mineralization. So you break humus, extract minerals out of it. So this inorganic nutrients are now again accessible to plants and animals. So that's called mineralization. So if you have a lot of humus, in a very slow manner, there will be a lot of mineralization happening. But if you have no humus, no mineralization will happen in that land, in that soil. Okay, and it's soil specific. It's not a water specific, because humus again, it's a layer on the soil. Everyone, is that clear? All these 5 points are clear? And all these 5 points basically say one single thing: breaking down complex organic matter into simpler inorganic substances that can be again reused by living systems to make complex substance again. So that's breaking down, and then you make up, again make biomass, again death, breaking down, again make. It's a cycle. And if you want, you should look at this decomposition cycle. You all can see this diagram on your screens. Iram, Aisha, and Rabia.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So can you figure out what it means now? Just look where the arrows are going. If anyone has a question, please ask. Otherwise, I have a question to ask all of you. I'll randomly ask any one of you based on this. Anyone has a question? If you ask me that question, then you are spared from asking that question. Sorry. Anyone? Who want to ask the question? Rabia, Iram, Aisha? No one? Okay, then I'm going to ask Aisha then. Aisha, are you there? Just speak up and confirm if you're there.
Yeah.
Yeah. My question is, where is this arrow going? This one. Can you see my cursor? What is this arrow telling you? Every arrow is going somewhere. Makes sense. Where is this arrow going? What is it saying? It's going in some abyss. Don't know somewhere. Aisha, if you would have asked me this question, then I would have given the answer, but you didn't, so I ask you. Reverse Uno. Aisha, where is that arrow going? What is it what does that arrow signifies? Aisha, it's not very difficult. Come on, think of it. See other arrows and what it's already marking. What is left is that arrow. Hiram, coming to you now. Where is that arrow going?
Maybe
No.
the leaf is like not eaten by anyone, so it's flying around.
It's just flying and being in the air forever. It's showing something. It's going, right? It's loss of biotic mass. It's simply the process of drying up. You know, when leaves fall, they are heavier because they have water content in it. You know, some water is always there. Over time, it just so loss of water or some residual CO2 that comes out. That's also a loss of the organic matter, right? No one is doing it. It's just there in the sun. So if a green leaf falls to the ground, like it says, a green leaf falls to the ground, it becomes brown and dry after some time. And the dry leaf is always lighter than the green leaf because it has a lot of water component. All the cells die, all the protoplasm, water in that, 95% every cytoplasm is water. All of that evaporates. For that, you don't need any decomposer. For that, you don't need any agent working on it. You just need temperature, heat, sunlight. So that's the loss because of drying up of a organic mass. It happens with everything, not just leaf. It happens with an animal who's dead. It happens with a new fallen tree. It happens with an insect that is dead. It dries up and a lot of that water and gases from the body goes out. Make sense, Iram and Aisha and Rabia? People, are you there?
Yes.
Yeah. Aisha? Was it very difficult? Was it very difficult? No, right? You just, and I'm sure that you might be having the hint of the answer, but you didn't give the answer. Yes, don't do that. Okay, please give answers. That's very important. So that's all about decomposition, all these 5 processes. Everything is clear?
Huh?
Yes, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so could you just show the
This thing?
yeah. So
Yeah.
the third arrow from the leaf, from the dry leaf, no, from the leaf eaten by the uh, earthworm
To the fungi, to the
yeah.
fungi.
How is it happening?
So it's not like an earthworm comes and eats the whole leaf. Sometimes some matter is partially decomposed by the decomposers or detritivorous like earthworms and other worms or bacteria, but most of it is just left like that. So other decomposers like fungi and bacteria, then they start working on it. If the detritivores have not consumed it fully, and it happens not, so leaf is an example here, but it happens with carcass. So when an animal is dead or is hunted, so suppose a lion hunted a gazelle. Now lion will eat mostly the flesh, leave alone the bones and the skin and the fur. Some other organisms then will come, which are like, which depends on like hyenas and some foxes and other small organisms. They will try to eat up what is left over. But when every flesh is gone from that carcass, bones are still there, right? bones are left, and fur is left, antlers are left. So then slowly bacteria starts to take over and fungi. You will see fungal growth happening on the bones, fungal growth, bacterial growth happening in the bone marrow, and they start to break it down from inside and from the surface. And over time, everything vanishes. And that's where these fungi and bacteria come. So that goes to fungi and bacteria. Okay, make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so since you have understood both production and decomposition, it's fairly easy for you to now understand energy flow, right? So when we talk about energy flow, it has a direction. Okay. Now, mostly when we, so first form of energy that's coming to the planet is the sun, solar energy, like you said in the beginning. But solar energy does not reaches the bottom of the sea. So the seabed, no sunlight can penetrate that deep and reach the organisms which are present in the seabed. So have you ever thought, how do those organisms get energy then? Are they living in energy less environment at the seabed, at the ocean floor? No radiation from the sun reaches there. So what happens? Is there any other source of heat energy apart from sun on planet Earth? How many of you have studied geography and have sliced the earth, and then you have drawn different layers, saying that in the middle there is a molten core, then there is semi-solid mantle, and the top part is crust, very beautifully like a sandwich. Yeah? People? How do volcanoes erupt? Where does volcano comes from? The lava, the magma. What is that? It's coming from the center of the earth, right? The core, the mantle, towards the center, like below the crust, correct? And is it hot? Yes, supremely hot, molten. The moment it comes out, it solidifies after some time. It sometimes takes a lot of months and years, solidifies and become rock. We call that as igneous rock. But when it's inside, it's molten. So which means a lot of heat energy is trapped inside Earth. So Earth is like an egg. When you boil an egg, if you just boil it for 2-3 minutes, you will see that the solidifying starts happening from top. Okay, half boiled egg is where when the crust, which is the shell, is hardened, then under that the albumin, which is white portion of the egg, is also solidified. But if it's a half boiled egg or not properly boiled, the core, the yolk, is still liquidy. Yes, do you understand, people? And it's hot. So that's like a analogy to understand Earth. So Earth has a hydrothermal energy or geothermal energy, which is towards the center of the earth. So this energy also leaks into the ocean floor through small vents called hydrothermal vents. And they keep the ocean floor provided with thermal energy. So the solar energy, the solar radiation, which reaches from top, from the space, is not the only source of heat that the planet Earth has. It has its own molten mantle and core that provides heat to the ocean bed. Okay. Is that clear, everyone?
Yes.
Yeah. So at deep sea level, the ecosystem behaves slightly differently. But so that's an exception, and I don't think that's in your syllabus. We can talk about it briefly if you are interested, but I'm not going to teach you about hydrothermal ecosystems. But let's talk about every other ecosystem that relies on sun. So all the solar energy that falls on Earth does not stay on Earth. Okay. Most of it gets reflected back by our glacier caps. Almost half. Around half of it is retained by plants, photosynthetic bacteria, which are autotrophs. And that around 50%, it's actually less than 50% in reality, is called PAR. So what is PAR? It is photosynthetically active radiation. Not all radiation coming from sun helps in photosynthesis. So that portion which is retained by autotrophs is called PAR. Okay, and from that PAR, how much plants can capture is just around very fraction, like at max 10%, max that we are talking about. All the plants present, all the plants along with all the photosynthetic bacteria present in ocean, all of them present everywhere on the planet can only trap 10% of the total heat energy sent by the sun. 50% just directly gets, more than 50% directly gets reflected back from the our South Pole and North Pole, because they are white solid ice sheets and they act like reflector mirrors of the Earth. If they were not there, Earth would have been heated up a lot. Okay. And that's what's happening now. Our glaciers are melting. We are not having the amount of ice cover that we used to have throughout the year. Hence, the amount of light that is getting reflected back is also decreasing, and the atmosphere of the Earth or the ground is absorbing a lot of heat, much more than what it should have absorbed. And there are gases in our atmosphere that are great in absorbing heat, like methane, chlorofluorocarbons, carbon dioxide. All these can retain heat energy a lot. That's why they are called greenhouse gases. And because we are not reflecting it effectively, the mean average temperature of Earth is rising. So summers are getting more and more hotter and winters are getting less and less colder over time. That's called global warming. So you understand how it works now? Why it's called global warming? Okay. So how it works is, from that 100% of sunlight radiation, at max 10% of the photosynthetically active, so around half of it is called photosynthetically active radiation, which reaches the plant. Rest half is just reflected back. From that half, only 10% is absorbed by the plants and photosynthetic bacteria and used for the process of photosynthesis. Is that clear to all of you? Say yes, no, something. People?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So let me go to one such pyramid to show you. Yes, this is it. So this is the pyramid of energy that happens at different levels. Okay. So let's say, to begin with, so 10 lakh joules of energy here, 10 lakh joules of energy, sorry. Yes, 10 lakh joules of sunlight is absorbed by the plant. So this is that 10%, okay, that is absorbed from the PAR. That when is absorbed, when it accounts for primary production, which is called P. So P is the level of producers. When they fix it, that energy, from that 10 lakh joule, how much can you see getting fixed? Just 10,000 joules. And what percentage it is? What percentage it is? what percentage is it is of the sunlight that gets fixed at the level of primary producers? 10,000 from 10 lakh. What percent? 1%, right? Simple, no? It has 2 more zeros. 4 zeros, 6 zeros. Does it make sense, people?
Yes.
What percentage is 10,000 of 10 lakhs? What percentage is 10,000 of 1 lakh? 10%. Because 10 such 10,000s will make 1 lakh. 100 such 10,000s will make 100 lakh. So it's 1%. So only 1% of the total sun's radiation energy, sunlight, is fixed by plants and all the photosynthetic producers for use to the next level. So the primary production, the flow of energy from sunlight to the primary producers, it's 1%. And from the primary producers, you will see primary consumer, secondary consumer, and tertiary consumer, PC, SC, and TC. Primary consumer is the herbivores that directly feed on the plants. Secondary consumers are carnivores that feed on herbivores. Tertiary consumers are carnivores then eat other carnivores. Okay. For example, grass eaten by what eats grass? Let's say deer, right? Hunted by some wild dogs or foxes or something. And they are also hunted by the apex predator, like the tigers or the lions, cheetahs, or the raptors, the birds which eat other organisms. Okay. Does it make sense, everyone? Now look at the level. 1% of the sunlight reaches at primary producers level, 10,000 joule. From that 10,000 joule, only 1,000 joule reaches the primary consumer, which is herbivores. 10%, right? From that 1,000 joules, just 10%, which is 100 joules, reaches the secondary consumer. And from that 100 joules, only 10 joules reaches the tertiary consumer. So you can imagine if a tertiary consumer has to survive, how much it has to feed from the secondary consumers. So that's why in every jungle, if there is an apex predator, they are only few in numbers because they depend on a lot of secondary consumers, and they depend in terms on a lot of primary consumers, and they depend in turns on a lot of primary producers. So the pyramid keeps going steeply smaller and smaller as it goes up. And if you directly talk about sunlight and tertiary consumer, it's, I don't know, 0.0000001% maybe. Okay. So from sunlight to primary consumers, just 1% rule. And after that, it's the 10% law. So that's called 10% law in nature. Once from the level of producers to the level of tertiary consumer, only 10% reaches up in the trophic level. And from sunlight to primary producers, 1%. But that 1% is too much because sun has a lot of energy, which it is radiating. So if you think now, which you should think, because of the sun shining there far away from us, we are able to make every cell of our body work. That's true, right? Make sense? Everything is dependent on sun, on the surface. Every life form, whether it's photosynthetic or not. Is that clear, everyone? Does that make sense to all of you?
Yes.
Yeah. Now remember this pyramid, because this pyramid comes a lot in boards, but there are other such pyramids. One is the pyramid of number, the number of individuals, how many numbers of producer are required to sustain consumers. So if you see, if there are 58 lakh grasses or shrubs in a jungle, 58 lakh. They can sustain around 7 lakh deers, primary consumers. 7 lakh deers can sustain about half the number, 3.5 lakhs secondary consumers, which are like another small organisms that hunt and pack. And more than 3.5 lakhs of secondary consumers can just sustain 3 tertiary consumers, which is like the apex predator in the ecosystem. So do you see this number getting steeply slow? Maybe that's why in a jungle, we just have very few apex predators because they require a lot of resource to survive on. Okay, then this is the same kind of graph for biomass, as you can see in terms of kg, kilogram per meter square. And this I'm giving you as a homework. So write down today's homework, and we'll start from all these pyramids in the next class. Ecological pyramids. Okay. So you have to just read energy flow. Okay. And I'm giving you 2 homeworks. One is it's somewhere here. Where is it? Yes. There are 2 kind of food chains. A board question comes on it. DFC, detritus food chain, and GFC. What is GFC? Some other. Yes, grazing food chain. So what is the difference between GFC, grazing food chain, and DFC, detritus food chain? You have to tell me in the next class. This is where we will start from. And second is, why this pyramid, this one here, 12.4, is inverted. Everywhere we are seeing that the lower one is the biggest. As we go up, less and less organisms survive on more and more down. That's how the pyramid should look. Base should be the broadest. This is something unique. The base is smaller and on top something bigger is surviving. How and why? You have to tell me in the next class. So 2 questions, GFC versus DFC, and why 12.4 is an inverted pyramid. Everyone noted down the question?
Yes.
Okay. So let's stop here at these pyramids. We'll do it again in the next class. And I think this is where we will finish the chapter with DFC, GFC, and the pyramids. Pyramids are the only important conceptual part of this chapter. Cool. So you should also look at this trophic levels as we were talking. Producer, grass, trees. Primary consumer, grasshoppers, cow, herbivores. Secondary consumers, wolf, fish, birds. And tertiary, humans and lion. So if you go by that graph, for one lion or for one human, we need a lot of these. Lots. Okay, anyway, so I'll see you in the next class with these 2 questions, and I want everyone to have their answers. Okay, please. See you. Bye-bye.